The lawyer's voice echoed through the mahogany-paneled office as he read the will, each word driving another nail into my coffin of disappointment. Victoria sat across from me, her perfectly manicured fingers already reaching for the velvet boxes containing Mom's legendary jewelry collection. $3 million worth of diamonds, emeralds, and sapphires that had been in our family for generations. Meanwhile, I stared at the worn leather diary in my hands, its pages yellowed with age, wondering if this was Mom's final way of telling me I'd never measured up. The musty smell of old paper filled my nostrils as my fingers traced the cracked spine, and I could feel Victoria's satisfied smirk burning into the side of my face without even looking at her. But as I opened that diary to the very last entry, dated just 3 days before Mom's death, my hands began to tremble. The words on that page would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my sister, and the mother I'd spent 23 years trying to please. Before I share what those words revealed, let me tell you something. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child, the one who never quite fit the family mold, then you need to hear this story. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what glitters in a jewelry box. Sometimes it's the truth that sets you free. Stay with me, because what I discovered in my mother's diary exposed a 20-year web of lies that my sister had carefully woven around our entire family. My name is Emma Sinclair, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family disappointment. Not because I was a bad person or because I'd done anything wrong. I simply had the misfortune of being born second and in the Sinclair family. That meant living forever in Victoria's shadow. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was the afterthought, the spare, the one whose achievements were met with polite nods while hers were celebrated with champagne toasts. Growing up in our sprawling Connecticut estate should have been a fairy tale. The house sat on 12 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, with a pool that sparkled like a sapphire in the summer sun and gardens that could have graced the pages of any luxury magazine. But fairy tales, I learned early, were for firstborns like Victoria. She was everything our parents wanted, beautiful in that effortless way that made people stop and stare, with honey blonde hair that caught the light just right and green eyes that sparkled with what everyone mistook for warmth. She'd graduated from Yale summa cum laude, married a senator's son, and by 30 had already been featured in 3 different society magazines as one of the most influential young philanthropists in New England. I, on the other hand, was the artist, the dreamer, the one who'd chosen to study creative, writing at a small liberal arts college instead of following Victoria to the Ivy League, the one who worked at a nonprofit helping underprivileged kids discover their love of reading instead of climbing the corporate ladder, the one who lived in a cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn instead of a penthouse on the Upper East Side. Every family gathering was an exercise in subtle humiliation, with relatives asking when I was going to get serious about life, while Victoria sat there with her perfect smile, occasionally throwing me pitying looks that cut deeper than any criticism. Mom had always been the worst when it came to comparisons. She'd display Victoria's achievements like trophies. Every award, every newspaper clipping, every photograph from a charity gala had its place of honor in our home. My own accomplishments, rare as they were acknowledged, ended up in drawers or forgotten corners. I still remember the day I got my first short story published in a literary magazine. I'd been so proud, so excited to show Mom. She'd glanced at it briefly, said, "That's nice, dear," and then spent the next hour gushing about Victoria's promotion at her investment firm. The pattern had been set early. When we were children, Victoria would spin elaborate tales about things I'd supposedly done, broken vases, stolen cookies, said cruel things to her friends. And Mom always believed her. Always. "Emma, how could you?" became a refrain I heard so often it might as well have been my middle name. Even when I protested my innocence, even when logic should have told her that 5-year-old me couldn't have possibly reached the top shelf where her antique figurine had been displayed, Victoria's word was gospel. I tried so hard to earn Mom's approval. God, did I try. I spent hours practicing piano because she'd mentioned once that she loved classical music, only to have her leave my recital early because Victoria had called with some minor emergency. I learned to cook her favorite French dishes, spending my meager savings on expensive ingredients, only to have her cancel our dinner plans because Victoria had surprised her with reservations at Le Bernardin. I wrote her letters, long, heartfelt letters about my life, my dreams, my love for her, and found them months later, unopened, in a stack of mail she'd deemed unimportant. The cruelest moment came during my college graduation. I'd worked so hard, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working 2 jobs to help pay for my education, because Mom had made it clear that the family money was earmarked for serious pursuits, code for Victoria's MBA. As I walked across that stage, I searched the crowd for her face, hoping against hope that this time, this one time, she'd chosen me. But her seat was empty. Victoria had scheduled her engagement party for the same day, claiming she'd forgotten about my graduation, and Mom had chosen to be there instead. "You understand, don't you, Emma?" she'd said over the phone. "Your sister only gets engaged once." The fact that I only graduated college once seemed lost on her. Dad had died when I was 15, and sometimes I wondered if things would have been different if he'd lived. He'd been the buffer between Mom's favoritism and my hurt feelings, always ready with a wink and a secret smile that told me I was seen, I was valued. After he was gone, it was like I'd lost my only ally in a war I'd never asked to fight. Mom's devotion to Victoria intensified, as if she was pouring all the love she'd had for Dad into her firstborn, leaving nothing for me. The truly insidious part was how Victoria played the role of the concerned sister in public. At family gatherings, she'd put her arm around me and tell everyone how proud she was of my little writing hobby, and how admirable it was that I wanted to help the less fortunate. The condescension dripped from every word, but she delivered them with such sweetness that I looked petty if I objected. She'd offer to help me with money, always in front of others, knowing I'd refuse because I'd learned long ago that her help came with strings that would strangle what little independence I'd managed to carve out for myself. She had this way of rewriting history that was almost impressive in its audacity. Stories of our childhood would be retold with her as the hero and me as the troubled child she'd tried so hard to help. The time she'd pushed me off my bike and I'd needed stitches became the time she'd tried to teach me to ride and I'd been too stubborn to listen. The time she'd deliberately spilled red wine on my prom dress an hour before my date arrived became the time she'd tried to help me with my makeup and I'd been clumsy. And everyone believed her. Everyone always believed her. Even Mom's illness had become another stage for Victoria's performance. When Mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 2 years ago, Victoria had swooped in like an avenging angel, taking control of everything. She moved Mom into her penthouse, hired the best doctors, the most expensive nurses, and she made sure everyone knew about it. Her Instagram was a carefully curated feed of her devotion, pictures of her holding Mom's hand during chemo, captions about the privilege of being able to care for the woman who'd given her everything. What those pictures didn't show was how she'd systematically cut me out of Mom's care, telling me my presence would be too stressful for Mom, that it was better if I stayed away. I'd tried to visit anyway, of course, but every time I showed up, Victoria had an excuse. Mom was sleeping. Mom had just had a bad reaction to medication. Mom wasn't feeling up to visitors. The nurses, clearly under Victoria's thumb, would apologetically turn me away. The few times I managed to see Mom, Victoria was always there, hovering, controlling the conversation, painting me as the absent daughter who only showed up when she felt guilty. "Emma's been so busy with her little job," she'd say, patting Mom's hand. "You know how she is, always putting strangers before family." The last time I saw Mom alive, she'd been so frail, so small in that enormous hospital bed in Victoria's guest room. I'd snuck in while Victoria was at a charity board meeting, bribing the nurse with coffee and pastries from Mom's favorite bakery. Mom had looked at me with eyes that seemed to see right through me, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something there. Recognition, maybe even regret. She'd tried to say something, her lips moving soundlessly, her hand reaching for mine. But then Victoria had come home early, and the moment was lost in a flurry of accusations about upsetting Mom, about not respecting boundaries, about being selfish as always. Mom died 3 days later. Victoria called me at 2 a.m., her voice thick with tears that I'm sure were real. She did love Mom, in her way, but even in that moment of grief, she couldn't resist getting in one more dig. "She went peacefully," she'd said. "I'm glad I could be here for her at the end. I know you tried, Emma, in your own way." The funeral had been a grand affair, with hundreds of people coming to pay their respects to Margaret Sinclair, philanthropist, socialite, mother extraordinaire. Victoria had given a eulogy that brought tears to everyone's eyes, speaking about Mom's grace, her generosity, her unwavering love for her family. She'd even mentioned me, calling me Mom's creative spirit, and talking about how Mom had always encouraged my unique path. It was masterful, really, how she managed to make my absence from Mom's final years seem like a choice I'd made rather than a situation she'd orchestrated. And now, here we were, 2 weeks later, sitting in the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. Mr. Pemberton, who'd been the family lawyer for 30 years, had called us both in, saying there were specific instructions from Mom about how her estate was to be divided. I'd known, walking in, that I wouldn't get much. I'd long ago accepted my place in the family hierarchy, but I'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, for something that showed Mom had thought of me as more than an obligation. A piece of jewelry that had been her mother's, maybe. The small Monet sketch she knew I'd always loved. Something, anything, that said, "I saw you, Emma. You mattered." Instead, Victoria got everything that mattered, the entire jewelry collection, worth more than most people would see in a lifetime, the house in Connecticut, the apartment in Paris that had been in the family for generations, the investment portfolio, the art collection, even the small things that might have meant something to me. Dad's watch, the pearl necklace Mom wore to my first piano recital, the emerald ring she'd promised me when I was 7 and still believed in promises. And me? I got a diary. A single, worn, leather-bound diary that looked like it had been bought at a drugstore decades ago. "There must be some mistake," Victoria had said, though her voice betrayed her satisfaction. Surely Mom meant for Emma to have something more substantial? Mr. Pemberton had adjusted his glasses, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Sinclair was very specific in her instructions. "The diary goes to Emma. She said Emma would understand its value." Victoria had actually laughed at that. Of course, Mom always said Emma lived in her own world. I suppose she thought a diary would appeal to her creative nature. I'd taken the diary with shaking hands, trying not to let them see how much this final rejection hurt. Even in death, Mom had found a way to remind me of my place. Victoria, the worthy daughter, got the treasures. Emma, the disappointment, got the cast-offs. But as I sat in my car afterward, unable to drive, unable to do anything but clutch that diary like it was the last piece of my mother I'd ever have, curiosity got the better of me. I opened it randomly, somewhere in the middle, and found entries from 20 years ago when I was 3 and Victoria was 7. Mom's handwriting was younger, more flowing, full of the kind of hope young mothers have. Emma said her first full sentence today. One entry read, "Love you, Mama." My heart nearly burst. She's such a bright little thing, always watching, always learning. Victoria seems jealous of the attention Emma's been getting lately. I need to be careful to balance my time with them both. I flipped forward, reading entry after entry, and a pattern began to emerge that made my chest tighten. Mom had seen it. She'd seen Victoria's jealousy, her little manipulations even then. She'd written about finding Victoria pinching baby me when she thought no one was looking. About Victoria deliberately breaking things and blaming me. About the elaborate lies that grew more sophisticated as Victoria got older. I don't know what to do about Victoria, one entry from my 10th birthday read. She told everyone at Emma's party that Emma had said she didn't want them there, that she only wanted family. Emma spent the entire party wondering why none of her friends came. When I confronted Victoria, she cried and said she was trying to protect Emma from being hurt because she'd overheard the girls saying they didn't really like her. But I saw the satisfaction in her eyes when Emma blew out her candles with tears on her cheeks. My hands were trembling now as I flipped through the years, reading Mom's private thoughts, her concerns, her growing awareness of what Victoria was doing. But alongside that awareness was something else. Fear. Fear of confronting Victoria. Fear of what she might do if challenged. Fear that had apparently paralyzed Mom into inaction, letting Victoria's behavior continue unchecked. But it was the final entries that changed everything. The date started 3 months before Mom's death, when she was already sick, but still lucid, still able to write, though her handwriting had become shaky and uncertain. "I've made terrible mistakes," one entry began. "I see that now when it's too late to fix them. Victoria has become what I allowed her to become, a master manipulator who believes she deserves everything and Emma nothing. And Emma, my sweet, brilliant, kind Emma, I've failed her in ways that break my heart every time I think about them." The next entry was dated a week later. "Victoria doesn't know I know. She thinks she's been so clever, but I've seen the documents. I've heard the phone calls she makes when she thinks I'm sleeping. She's been moving money from the family trust for years, using her position as financial power of attorney to funnel funds into her own accounts. Nearly $8 million so far. She's also been selling off pieces of the estate, artwork, antiques, rare books, and keeping the profits. She tells me we need to liquidate assets for my medical care, but I've seen the receipts. My treatment costs a fraction of what she claims." My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. I flipped to the next entry. "I've contacted a private investigator. What he's found is worse than I imagined. Victoria has been sabotaging Emma for years. She called Emma's publisher and told them Emma had plagiarized her work, nearly destroying her career before it began. She sent emails from a spoofed address that looked like Emma's, turning down job offers, burning bridges Emma never even knew existed. She even, God forgive me for not seeing it, she even bribed the nurse at the first hospital to tell Emma I didn't want to see her. My baby girl has been trying to reach me, and Victoria has built a wall between us that I was too blind to see." The next entry was harder to read, the writing more erratic. "I've changed my will. Victoria will think she's won when she gets the jewelry, the houses, the obvious wealth. But I've had Mr. Pemberton set up a secret trust, one Victoria doesn't know about. The real family fortune, the investments my father made that I've kept hidden even from my own children, worth nearly $50 million, will go to Emma when she finds the truth. This diary is the key. The last entry will explain everything. I pray Emma forgives me. I pray she understands that my coldness these last years wasn't real. Victoria has been drugging me, keeping me compliant, foggy. The investigator found the prescriptions she's been filling in my name, antipsychotics that make me docile, confused. She's been killing me slowly, all while playing the devoted daughter." I had to stop reading. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the diary. Victoria had been drugging our mother? The room seemed to spin around me as I tried to process what I was reading. All those times Mom had seemed distant, confused, when she'd looked right through me. It hadn't been disappointment or indifference. It had been Victoria's drugs clouding her mind. I forced myself to continue reading. I'm getting sicker. Victoria increases the doses when she thinks I'm too alert, but I've been pretending to take them, hiding them when she's not looking. It's given me enough clarity to write this, to make arrangements. Mr. Pemberton has been my lifeline. He's the only one Victoria hasn't been able to fool or buy. He knows everything now. He has copies of all the evidence. When Emma brings him this diary, when she reads the last entry, he'll know what to do. The second to last entry was brief, just a few lines. I don't have much time left. The cancer is winning, but worse, Victoria has figured out I've been hiding the pills. She started injecting them instead. I can feel my mind slipping away again. Emma, if you're reading this, know that I love you. I've always loved you. You were the best part of me, the child who inherited my father's kind heart instead of my mother's cold ambition. Everything I seemed to give Victoria was just for show. The real inheritance, the real legacy, was always meant for you. And then, the final entry, dated just 3 days before Mom died. The handwriting was barely legible, clearly written in desperation. Emma, my darling girl, if you're reading this, then you have the diary, and Victoria thinks she's won. Let her think that for now. The truth is this. 30 years ago, before I married your father, I inherited something from my grandfather that no one else knows about. Not even your father knew. It's a collection of first edition books, manuscripts, and letters from some of the greatest writers in history. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Woolf, Austen, all of them, and more. The collection is worth approximately $75 million at current market value. But more than that, I know it's something you'll treasure for what it is, not just what it's worth. The collection is hidden in a climate-controlled storage facility in Boston. Pemberton has the access codes and the key. But there's more. I've documented everything Victoria has done. The theft, the fraud, the drugging, all of it. The investigators' reports are with Pemberton too. Victoria won't just lose the inheritance she stole, she'll face criminal charges. But I'm leaving the choice to you, Emma. You can expose her and claim everything that's rightfully yours, or you can take the collection and the hidden trust and walk away, leaving her to live with her hollow victory. I know you'll make the right choice because you always have. You chose kindness when she chose cruelty. You chose truth when she chose lies. You chose to love me even when I seemed not to love you back. The storage facility is at 42 Harbor Drive, Unit 1847. The code is your birthday, the real one, not the one Victoria convinced me was wrong when you were 5. Yes, I eventually figured that out too. 03/15/2001. All my love, always and forever, Mom P.S. Look for the safety deposit box at Boston First National, Box 472. Pemberton has the key. Inside is my real jewelry collection, the one Victoria doesn't know about. The pieces she's getting are replicas I had made years ago when I first suspected she was selling things off. The real collection is worth closer to $10 million. I wanted you to have something beautiful to remember that you were always precious to me, even when I couldn't show it. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, reading and rereading that final entry. Every emotion possible crashed through me in waves. Grief for the mother I'd lost and the years we'd wasted. Rage at Victoria for what she'd done. Relief that I hadn't been crazy or unlovable. And a strange sort of joy that Mom had seen me, had loved me, had tried to protect me in the only way she could manage. The next morning, I called Mr. Pemberton. His secretary put me through immediately, as if she'd been expecting my call. "Emma," he said, his voice warm with something that sounded like relief. "I've been waiting for you to contact me. You've read the diary?" "All of it," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Is it true, all of it?" "Every word," he confirmed. "Your mother was a remarkable woman, Emma. She knew she'd made mistakes, but she did everything she could to make things right before the end. I have everything here, the investigators' reports, the evidence of Victoria's fraud, the access codes for the storage facility, the keys you'll need. When can you come in?" I met with him that afternoon. The office felt different this time, less intimidating, and more like stepping into a sanctuary. Mr. Pemberton had boxes of documents prepared, everything meticulously organized and labeled. The investigators' reports were damning. Photographs of Victoria meeting with dealers to sell family heirlooms, bank records showing the systematic theft, medical records proving she'd been obtaining dangerous psychiatric drugs without proper authorization. Your mother was very thorough, Mr. Pemberton said. She knew Victoria would contest anything that wasn't airtight. But there's something else you should know. The $50 million trust your mother mentioned, it's actually grown to nearly $60 million now. She was a very shrewd investor, your mother. She just hid it well. And Victoria has no idea? None whatsoever. As far as she knows, she inherited everything of value. She's already started liquidating assets, planning to sell the Connecticut house. She called me yesterday to start the paperwork. I spent the next week quietly gathering everything. I visited the storage facility in Boston, using the code Mom had left me. The space was enormous, climate-controlled, and filled with treasures that took my breath away. First editions of Pride and Prejudice, The Great Gatsby, To the Lighthouse, original manuscripts with authors' handwritten notes in the margins, letters between literary giants discussing their work, their lives, their dreams. It was a collection any museum in the world would kill for. But more than that, it was a love letter from my mother to me, an acknowledgement of who I really was. The safety deposit box held even more surprises. The real jewelry collection was stunning, but it was the letter Mom had left with it that made me cry. My dearest Emma, these pieces have been in our family for generations, passed from mother to daughter. I'm breaking tradition by not giving them to the eldest, but then again, Victoria broke something far more sacred. The trust between sisters, between daughter and mother. Each piece has a story. The sapphire necklace was worn by your great-grandmother to her wedding. The emerald bracelet was a gift from your great-great-grandfather to his wife when your great-grandfather was born. The diamond tiara, yes, there's a tiara, my darling, was worn by every Sinclair bride for 200 years. Wear them knowing you were chosen, Emma. Wear them knowing you were loved. Mom. 2 weeks after the will reading, I made my decision. I could have simply taken everything and disappeared, left Victoria to her stolen goods and false victory. But that wasn't justice. And more importantly, it wasn't what Mom really wanted. She wanted the truth revealed, even if she'd been too afraid to reveal it herself while she was alive. I arranged for a family gathering at Victoria's penthouse. I told her I wanted to bury the hatchet, to move forward as sisters should. She was suspicious at first, but her ego won out. She couldn't resist the opportunity to be magnanimous in victory, to play the gracious sister welcoming the prodigal back into the fold. She'd invited everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. About 50 people in total, all gathered in her enormous living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Victoria had even displayed Mom's jewelry, or what she thought was Mom's jewelry, in glass cases she'd had specially made. She was wearing the emerald necklace that had supposedly been worth $1 million alone, not knowing it was actually a replica worth maybe a few thousand at most. "I'm so glad we could all be here," Victoria said, raising her champagne glass. "Family is so important, especially now that we've lost Mom. I know she would want us to come together, to support each other." "You're absolutely right," I said, standing up. "Mom would want the truth to bring us together." Victoria's smile flickered slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Of course, Mom always valued honesty." "She did," I agreed, "which is why she left me this." I held up the diary. Her personal diary, documenting the last 30 years of her life. The room had gone quiet, everyone sensing the shift in atmosphere. "How lovely," Victoria said, though her voice had tightened. "I'm sure there are some beautiful memories in there." "There are," I said. "Like this one, from 3 months ago." I opened the diary and began to read. "Victoria doesn't know I know. She thinks she's been so clever, but I've seen the documents. She's been moving money from the family trust for years." Victoria's face had gone white. "Emma, I don't think this is appropriate. Or this one," I continued, flipping pages. "She's been drugging me, keeping me compliant, foggy. The investigator found the prescriptions she's been filling in my name." The room erupted. Aunts gasping, uncles demanding to know if this was true, cousins pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Victoria tried to speak, to deny, to explain, but I kept reading. Entry after entry, Mom's words painting the picture of a daughter who had systematically destroyed her family for greed and pride. "Stop!" Victoria finally screamed. "Stop it! Those are lies. Mom was sick. She was confused." "Then you won't mind if we verify everything," I said calmly. "Mr. Pemberton has all the documentation, the investigators' reports, the bank records, the medical files, even recordings of you on the phone with dealers, selling off family heirlooms and pocketing the money." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria looked around the room, searching for allies, for anyone who would take her side. But she found only shock, disgust, and in some cases, a dawning realization that they too had been manipulated by her over the years. "You poisoned her," our Aunt Catherine said, her voice shaking. "You poisoned your own mother. And you let us all believe Emma was the problem child," Uncle Richard added. "All these years you made us think—" He turned to me. "Emma, I'm so sorry. We should have seen it. We should have questioned—" "It's not your fault," I said. "Victoria is very good at what she does. Mom knew that. It's why she made sure I would have proof." Victoria tried one last gambit. "Even if any of this is true, which it isn't, I still have the inheritance. I still have—" "The replicas?" I asked sweetly. "Yes, you do have those. Mom had them made years ago when she realized you were selling off the real pieces. The actual jewelry collection is safe in a Boston bank vault where Mom put it for safekeeping. The sound Victoria made then was barely human, a shriek of rage and disbelief that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. She lunged at me, fingers clawed, but Uncle Richard and two of our cousins held her back. "You're lying," she gasped. "You're lying. Test them. Test the jewelry. It's real." "By all means," I said. "I'm sure everyone here would be very interested in the results." The party, if you could still call it that, broke up quickly after that. Victoria was left screaming threats and denials to an empty room while I walked out with the diary clutched to my chest. Mr. Pemberton had already filed the paperwork with the police. By morning, Victoria would be facing charges for fraud, elder abuse, and theft. The next few months were a whirlwind. Victoria was arrested, and though she tried to fight the charges, the evidence was overwhelming. She'd been so confident in her schemes that she'd gotten sloppy, leaving a paper trail that led investigators to even more crimes than Mom had known about. She'd been embezzling from the charities she'd claimed to run, taking money meant for underprivileged children and funneling it into her own accounts. She'd been blackmailing several family friends, using secrets she'd learned while playing the role of the perfect daughter to extort money and favors. The trial was a sensation. The media couldn't get enough of the story. The socialite who'd drugged her own mother, stolen millions, and destroyed her sister's life out of pure jealousy. Victoria tried to maintain her innocence to the end, but when faced with the mountain of evidence, even her expensive lawyers couldn't save her. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 10. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was in Boston, carefully cataloging Mom's book collection with the help of a team from the Smithsonian, who were beside themselves with excitement over the discovery. I decided to loan most of the collection to museums and universities, keeping only a few precious pieces for myself, including a first edition of Jane Eyre, with a handwritten note from Charlotte Brontë that read, "To those who feel unseen, you are the heroines of your own stories." The house in Connecticut sold for $8 million. The Paris apartment went for another $5 million. The stocks and bonds in the trust Mom had hidden were worth $60 million and growing. But the real value wasn't in the money. It was in the freedom it gave me. I quit my nonprofit job, not because I didn't love it, but because I could now start my own. I founded the Margaret Sinclair Foundation for Literary Arts, providing free creative writing programs for underprivileged youth across the country. I bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, not huge but perfect for me, with a library that took up the entire third floor. I filled it with books, both from Mom's collection and new ones, creating the sanctuary I'd always dreamed of. I wrote my first novel there, a story about two sisters and the secrets that divided them. It became a bestseller, though I published it under a pseudonym. I didn't want Victoria's notoriety affecting my work. But perhaps the most healing thing was the letters I found in Mom's collection, not from famous authors, but from Mom herself. She'd written me letters over the years, letters she'd never sent, pouring out her love, her pride, her regret at not being strong enough to stand up to Victoria. In one, dated on my college graduation day, she wrote, "My dearest Emma, I'm sitting in Victoria's apartment, listening to her laugh with her guests at her engagement party, and all I can think about is you, walking across that stage alone. I should be there. I should be the loudest voice cheering for you, but I'm a coward. Emma." I'm afraid of what Victoria might do if I defy her, afraid of the chaos she can create. She's made me dependent on her, convinced everyone I'm fragile, that I need her constant care. But the truth is, she needs me to need her. It's how she maintains her power. You don't need anyone, Emma. You never have. You're the strongest person I know, even if you don't realize it. You've survived years of emotional abuse with your kindness intact, your creativity undimmed. You've built a life of meaning and purpose, while Victoria has built nothing but a house of cards that will eventually fall. I pray that someday you'll forgive me, not for your sake, but for mine. Because the guilt of failing you is eating me alive more surely than this cancer ever could. All my love, Mom. I had that letter framed and hung it in my library, a reminder that love can exist even when it's hidden, that truth eventually finds its way to the light. It's been 3 years now since that day in the lawyer's office. Victoria is still in prison, though she writes me letters sometimes, long, rambling things that alternate between begging for forgiveness and threatening revenge. I don't read them anymore. I've instructed the prison to return them unopened. The family has slowly come back together, freed from Victoria's manipulations. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, sharing their own stories of Victoria's cruelty, the ways she'd turned us against each other for her own amusement. We have monthly dinners now, real ones, where we laugh and share and support each other the way families should. I've fallen in love with a wonderful man named James, a literature professor who cried when he saw my library and who reads me poetry in bed on Sunday mornings. He knows my whole story and loves me, not in spite of it, but because of how it shaped me. We're getting married next month in a small ceremony in the Connecticut house's garden. I couldn't bring myself to sell it after learning how much Mom had loved it before Victoria poisoned those memories. I've had the emerald ring from Mom's real collection reset into an engagement ring. It catches the light when I write, reminding me that I was chosen, I was loved, I was seen even when I thought I was invisible. Sometimes I think about Victoria in her cell, stripped of all the material things she sold her soul for. I wonder if she ever truly understands what she lost. Not the money or the jewelry or the houses, but the chance to have a real relationship with her sister, with her mother. I wonder if she realizes that in trying to have everything, she ended up with nothing. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. I'm too busy living the life Mom wanted for me, the life I've built from the ashes of our broken family. I teach writing workshops for kids who remind me of myself, the ones who feel unseen, unheard, unloved. I tell them that their voices matter, that their stories deserve to be told. And sometimes when they ask how I know that's true, I tell them about a diary, a mother's love, and the power of truth to set us free. The Margaret Sinclair Foundation has helped over 10,000 young writers in the past 3 years. We've published anthologies of their work, provided college scholarships, connected them with mentors who see their potential. Every success story feels like a small victory over the years of silence I endured. Last week, I received a package from a woman in Maine. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The letter explained that she'd been Mom's roommate in college before Mom met Dad, before Victoria and I were even possibilities. The photograph showed Mom at 19, laughing at something off camera, her hair wild in the wind, looking free and unburdened in a way I'd never seen her. "Your mother was the brightest light I ever knew," the letter said. "She had such dreams, such plans. She wanted to be a writer, you know. She had notebooks full of stories. But then she met your father, and his family had different expectations for their daughter-in-law. She put aside her dreams to become what they needed her to be. When I heard about everything that happened with Victoria, I wasn't surprised. Your mother always struggled with standing up for herself. But Emma, she loved you. She saw herself in you, the self she'd buried to keep the peace. Every time you pursued your writing, you were living the dream she'd abandoned. That's why Victoria hated you so much. You were the reminder of what your mother could have been if she'd been brave enough to choose herself." I cried reading that letter, understanding finally why Mom had hidden that book collection, why she'd saved it for me. It wasn't just an inheritance, it was her unlived dream, passed down to the daughter who'd had the courage to live it. The storage facility in Boston has become my second home. I've converted part of it into a study where I write, surrounded by the literary giants Mom collected. Sometimes I swear I can feel her there with me, finally free from Victoria's drugs and manipulations, finally able to be the mother she'd wanted to be. I found her notebooks in a box hidden behind a false panel in the storage unit. Her college stories, unfinished but brilliant, full of the voice I'd heard so rarely in life. I'm editing them now, planning to publish them under her name. The world should know that Margaret Sinclair was more than a socialite, more than a victim. She was a writer, a dreamer, a woman who loved her daughter enough to plan the ultimate revelation from beyond the grave. The truth is, I could have exposed Victoria years ago if I'd been paying attention. The signs were all there. The inconsistencies in her stories, the way Mom's behavior changed when Victoria was around, the financial discrepancies that should have raised red flags. But I'd been so conditioned to accept my role as the lesser daughter that I'd never questioned it. I'd internalized the narrative Victoria had created so completely that I'd become complicit in my own diminishment. That's the insidious nature of emotional abuse. It doesn't just hurt you in the moment, it rewires your understanding of yourself, makes you believe you deserve the pain, that it's somehow your fault. Even now, 3 years later, I sometimes catch myself apologizing for taking up space, for having needs, for existing. James has to remind me that I'm allowed to have opinions, to disagree, to be imperfect without it being a moral failing. The therapy has helped. Dr. Martinez, a specialist in family trauma and narcissistic abuse, has guided me through the process of unpacking decades of manipulation. She helped me understand that Victoria's behavior wasn't really about me at all. It was about her own profound insecurity, her pathological need for control, her inability to share attention or love. I was simply the most convenient target, the obstacle between her and total domination of our family. Your sister created a false reality and forced everyone to live in it, Dr. Martinez explained during one session. Your mother's diary didn't just expose lies, it shattered an entire constructed universe. That's why the revelation was so powerful. It wasn't just about money or jewelry, it was about the fundamental truth of who you all were to each other. The extended family's response has been interesting to watch. Some, like Aunt Catherine and Uncle Richard, have been nothing but supportive, apologizing repeatedly for not seeing through Victoria's facade. Others have been more complicated, struggling to reconcile the Victoria they thought they knew with the criminal she turned out to be. A few have even suggested I should have kept quiet, that exposing Victoria hurt the family's reputation. To them, I say what Mom couldn't. The truth is more important than reputation. Silence in the face of abuse isn't keeping the peace, it's enabling violence. Every day I stayed quiet was another day Victoria could destroy someone else's life. How many charity funds did she steal from? How many other family members did she manipulate and blackmail? How many people suffered because we were all too polite to call out the obvious? I've started speaking publicly about the experience, sharing our story at conferences on family trauma and financial abuse. The response has been overwhelming. So many people have reached out with their own stories of family members who stole, lied, manipulated, and gaslit their way through life, leaving destruction in their wake. They talk about the guilt of exposing family members, the fear of being seen as vindictive or cruel for telling the truth. "Your mother's diary gave you permission to seek justice," one woman wrote to me. "I wish I had something like that. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that what I experienced was real. That's why I'm writing this book now, the full story of everything that happened. Not for revenge or profit, but for all the Emmas out there who are being told they're too sensitive, too difficult, too much, or not enough. For everyone who's been gaslit into doubting their own reality. For every family keeping toxic secrets to preserve a false peace. Victoria's lawyer has threatened to sue if I publish it, claiming defamation. I laughed when I got the cease and desist letter. Truth isn't defamation, and I have Mom's diary, the investigators' reports, the court records, and the testimony of dozens of family members who finally felt free to speak up. Victoria can threaten all she wants from her prison cell. She has no power over me anymore. The book will be dedicated to Mom, of course, but also to Dad, who died too young to see justice done. I've been reading his journals too, found in the same storage unit. He knew what Victoria was, even then. He wrote about his concerns, his attempts to get Mom to see what was happening. But Mom was already too deep in Victoria's web, too afraid to confront the monster she'd helped create. "Emma is special," Dad wrote in one entry when I was 13. "She has a light that Victoria keeps trying to extinguish. I pray she's strong enough to keep it burning until she can get free." I was, Dad. Barely, but I was. The wedding is next month, as I mentioned. We're keeping it small. Just the family members who've shown they can be trusted, the friends who stood by me when I had nothing, and a few of the young writers from the foundation who've become like family to me. We're having it catered by the kids from one of our culinary writing programs. They're creating a menu based on foods mentioned in classic literature. It's pretentious and perfect, and exactly what Mom would have loved. I'm wearing Mom's wedding dress, found preserved in the storage unit with a note, "For Emma, when she finds someone who sees her light." It fits perfectly, like it was waiting for me all along. James proposed in the storage unit, actually. We were cataloging books when he pulled out a hollowed-out first edition of Persuasion with a ring inside. "You pierce my soul," he quoted. "I am half agony, half hope. Tell me not that I am too late, that such precious feelings are gone forever." I said yes before he could finish the quote. "We're going to live in the brownstone, fill it with books, and eventually children who will never doubt they're loved equally, never compete for affection that should be freely given. We're going to break the cycle that nearly broke me." Sometimes I dream about Mom. Not the medicated, manipulated version from her final years, but the real her, the one who wrote those stories in college, who loved literature, who saw me even when she couldn't show it. In the dreams, we sit in the storage facility, surrounded by books, and she tells me the stories behind each acquisition. She's free in these dreams, laughing and animated in a way she never could be in life. "I'm proud of you," she always says before I wake up. "You did what I couldn't do. You chose truth over comfort, justice over false peace. You chose yourself." The last time I visited Victoria in prison was 6 months ago. She'd requested the meeting through her lawyer, claiming she had information about Mom that I needed to know. I almost didn't go, but curiosity won out. She looked smaller in her orange jumpsuit, her perfect hair now showing gray roots, her manicured nails replaced by short, bare ones. But her eyes still held that calculating gleam, that constant assessment of how to manipulate any situation to her advantage. "You look well," she said, as if we were meeting for lunch instead of talking through reinforced glass. "What did you want to tell me about Mom?" I asked, not interested in pleasantries. She smiled, that cold smile I remembered from childhood. Just that she knew. She knew everything, much earlier than that diary suggests. She knew when we were children. She just chose me anyway. It was meant to hurt, to plant doubt about Mom's love, to taint the victory I'd found in her diary. The old Emma might have been destroyed by it, but I'd done too much work, come too far, to let Victoria's poison affect me anymore. Maybe she did, I said calmly. Maybe she chose you out of fear or habit or misguided loyalty. But in the end, she chose truth. She chose justice. She chose me, and that's what matters. Victoria's face contorted with rage. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll get out eventually, and when you do, you'll be a convicted felon with no money, no connections, and no power, I interrupted. Everyone knows what you are now. Your currency was always other people's ignorance. Without that, you're nothing. I left her there, sputtering threats at empty air. That was the last time I'll ever see her. She's written me dozens of letters since then, but I've instructed the prison to return them all. Her words have no power over me anymore. The foundation is expanding internationally next year. We've partnered with schools in 12 countries to bring creative writing programs to underserved communities. Each new student we reach feels like another small victory, another light that won't be extinguished by someone else's darkness. I've also started a support group for survivors of family financial abuse. We meet monthly in the Brownstones Library, sharing stories and strategies for recovery. Last week, a young man named David shared how his brother had stolen his identity and ruined his credit while his parents insisted he not press charges to keep the family together. The group surrounded him with the support his family wouldn't provide. That's what we do. We become the family each other needed but didn't have. The jewelry collection sits in a vault, waiting. I've worn pieces for special occasions, the sapphire necklace to a foundation gala, the emerald bracelet to my book launch. Each time, I feel Mom with me, finally able to adorn her chosen daughter with the treasures that were always meant to be mine. But the real treasure was never the jewelry or the money or even the books, precious as they are. It was the truth that I was loved, that I was seen, that I mattered. The truth that the story Victoria told about me was never real, just the desperate fiction of a deeply disturbed person who couldn't bear to share the spotlight. I'm 32 now, and I feel like my life is just beginning. Every morning, I wake up in my sun-filled bedroom, James beside me, and I choose how to spend my day. No more walking on eggshells, no more shrinking to make others comfortable, no more accepting crumbs when I deserve the whole feast. The young writers I work with often ask me how I found the courage to expose Victoria, to risk everything for the truth. I tell them what I've learned. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. For years, I was terrified of Victoria, of her anger, her retaliation, her ability to turn others against me. But living in fear was killing me slowly. Just like Victoria's drugs killed Mom slowly. The only way to survive was to drag everything into the light. Truth is like sunlight, I tell them. It might hurt your eyes at first if you've been living in darkness, but ultimately, it's what makes things grow. Last month, I got a call from a Hollywood producer interested in adapting our story for a limited series. The money would be enough to fund the foundation for decades. But more importantly, it would reach millions of people who might be living their own versions of our story, thinking they're alone, thinking they're crazy, thinking they deserve the abuse they're experiencing. I said yes with one condition. The series has to end with resources for victims of family abuse, financial fraud, and gaslighting. It has to be more than entertainment. It has to be a lifeline for people who need it. The producer agreed immediately. This story could save lives, she said. And maybe it will. Maybe someone will watch Victoria's manipulation tactics and recognize them in their own family. Maybe someone will see Mom's diary and realize they need to document the abuse they're experiencing. Maybe someone will see me confronting Victoria and find the courage to confront their own abuser. That's the thing about truth. It ripples outward, touching lives in ways you never expect. One diary, hidden in a dusty storage unit, has already changed hundreds of lives through the foundation. Who knows how many more it might reach? As I finish writing this, I'm sitting in Mom's storage unit, surrounded by first editions and handwritten letters from literary giants. James is reading in the corner, occasionally sharing particularly beautiful passages. Outside, Boston is bustling with life, unaware of the treasures hidden in this climate-controlled room. I pick up Mom's diary, running my fingers over the worn leather cover. Such a simple thing, yet it held the power to destroy lies that had been built over decades. It makes me think about all the diaries out there, all the documented truths waiting to be discovered, all the victims who might become victors if they just had the courage to speak up. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, who's been gaslit and manipulated and made to feel less than they are, I want you to know, you're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're not the problem. Document everything. Tell someone you trust. Seek help. And above all, believe in your own truth, even when everyone around you is living in someone else's fiction. The sun is setting now, casting golden light through the windows of the storage unit. It illuminates the books, making them glow like treasure, which they are. But the real treasure is freedom. Freedom from lies, from manipulation, from the prison of someone else's making. Victoria may have gotten the fake jewelry, but I got something infinitely more valuable: the truth. And with it, the power to rewrite my own story, not as the forgotten daughter or the family disappointment, but as the survivor, the truth teller, the keeper of real treasures. Mom's final gift wasn't just money or books or jewelry. It was permission. Permission to stop accepting less than I deserved. Permission to expose the lies. Permission to be the heroine of my own story instead of a bit player in Victoria's. And that's exactly what I've become. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, and if you believe that everyone deserves to have their true worth seen, please like this video and share on it with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below and tell me, what was the moment in the story that resonated with you the most? And if you want more powerful stories about finding your strength and overcoming the odds, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.